Hello everybody and welcome to the fourth and final instalment of our Landlord Academy series. I'm Zach Snelling, the Head of Property Management for Ray White New Zealand, and what a month it has been, full of free education and resources. Thanks for coming along for the ride. We're going to close things off with a bang. Tonight we're looking at the future of property investment and in particular property finance, and what this will mean for both landlords who are already in the market now, as well as those who are considering getting into investment and starting to get on that ladder themselves. We're going to be discussing things like interest rates, the importance of debt structures, what our most prolific rental properties are, what's most in demand, what to look out for an investment property, and much more. Now, every week we have a very special guest joining us. This week it's no different. We've got the CEO of Loan Market here, Brian Green. Welcome to joining it. Welcome here. Welcome to be with us. It's great to have you here.
Oh, delighted to be here, Zach. Thanks for having me, mate.
Now, you've come a long way, haven't you?
Sunny D, mate. Yeah.
Nice, thanks for making the trip up, mate. Now, I do a bit of research on everyone here as they come in as a guest. Obviously, you're the CEO of Loan Market New Zealand. It's the largest mortgage brokerage in New Zealand, processing over $5 billion in mortgages every year. You've had a 20-year career in Australasian banking and finance prior to joining Loan Market. You've got your own advisory practice, which, congratulations, it's one of the top 5 internationally.
Thank you.
That's awesome. And you're the proud owner of 2 racehorses, but you certainly don't recommend that as a favourable investment strategy, do you?
No, Zach, they're about photos and hangovers, mate.
Yeah.
They're fast, but not as fast as I'd like them to be.
And how long have you had them for?
Oh, just a couple of years, just with a couple of mates, as I say, they're about photos and a good time.
Nice. Well, what we are going to be talking about tonight is some good investment strategies. So Brian can help us with that one. But look, I wanted to start, Brian, tell us a little bit about Loan Market, what the services are that you provide, and how they can really help both the investors that are already in the market, as well as, like we said, ones that are wanting to get on that ladder.
Sure. Look, it's a wonderful business. I'm really proud to be involved with it. 25 years coming up in New Zealand, family owned. And look, essentially we do 3 things, Zach. We make sure that the money that people want to borrow, they're able to. We negotiate the very best possible terms from the banks in New Zealand, and we deal with all of them. But by far and away the most important element is that we give people advice. We hold their hands through the transaction to make sure what they're trying to achieve is effected and in the best possible way. And best of all, we're paid by the banks. It's a free service.
Awesome. Now, I wanted to ask you, because there's this sort of, we grow up with this idea of you're with your bank for 10 years, for 20 years, and that's kind of where you need to go, first port of call for any kind of lending finance. What are your thoughts to that rhetoric, that language?
Yes, well, Dad banked at the bank and his dad banked at that bank, so I bank at that bank and that's where I should get my finance from. And look, by and large, often, and more often than not, we actually do place people with the bank they bank with. But it's about sitting down and understanding their requirements and giving them advice. And I just can't stress enough, and we're going to show examples of that, live examples of that tonight.
Yeah.
It makes all the difference.
And it's as easy as picking up the phone and giving them a call, and you'll probably hear me say that a few times tonight, but the advice piece is crucial. Now, tonight, Brian, we're here to talk about the future of property investment, and from my perspective, looking after property management for Ray White, the future is here and we know what it is. There are more tenants looking for rental properties. They're wanting to stay longer in their rental properties and they really want to make it their home. And there simply aren't enough rental properties in the market available for us to give them. So what we've got Brian here for tonight is hopefully show all of you watching that now is a great time to get into property investment if you're not already. And if you are already in property investment, now is a time to add another sort of home to that portfolio and get stuck into it. So we've got a bit of content to get through tonight, Brian. Shall we get into it?
Yes, 100%.
Fantastic. So, look, talk us through debt structures, because we had a chat about the setting up for tonight. Why are these so important?
Yes, well, look, we're educated from a young age. We need to repay our debt, and we do. But there's 2 types. There's good debt, and that's debt that's attributed to an investment or business where we're generating income.
Yep.
And there's what we call bad debt, which is essentially debt that we borrowed to fund ourselves into a property which has no tax benefits. So if we borrowed the money to fund into our house, there's no tax benefits. If we borrowed money to fund into an investment property, the interest is tax deductible.
Yep.
So if you think about that, I own my house, I have a very small mortgage or a smallish mortgage, I buy an investment property, our focus needs to be reducing our home loan and keeping our investment debt interest only until our home loan's gone. And that's difficult for people to sort of get their head around, to go, I'm interest only?
Well, because we're so used to, you've got to pay off the principal, it goes against what we're kind of told.
It does, but we're not saying to people don't repay debt, we're just saying repay the bad debt first. So our owner-occupied home is always our absolute focus, because the interest on our investment debt is tax deductible. So if we reduce that, we reduce the tax deductions on it. So get the home loan not paid off to zero, and we go from there. Generally, 5 years is the maximum period a bank will allow you to go interest only without reviewing your position.
Yep.
And historically that was pretty much, we just want to do a sense check because banks are responsible. They want to make sure that if you're interest only here, are we reducing here? But over the last few years, part of the rules that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand have brought in is that they feel we have too much debt in New Zealand. So they want all debt after 5 years to start to reduce. So we'll have people watching tonight where they've had investment debt for a period of time, it's about to come off their 5 year period, and their bank's saying, no, now you've got to go principal and interest, and they've still got some home loan debt. Well, they don't have to wear that.
Yeah, so what do they do? You know, you get to the end of your 5 year interest only term. What does someone watching here do at that point?
They call us.
Yep. You'll hear that
because
a few times.
we'll negotiate with the bank that they're with around the client's position, demonstrate that their overall financial position is improving.
Yep.
And if that bank doesn't want to play, well, we have a stable of others that will.
Now, in terms of, we're talking about the importance of debt structures, how often do you see this being an issue for investors where they haven't set things up correctly, and what are the consequences for them?
Look, it's the most common mistake, to be honest, Zach. When people come to see us about the stuff, the first question they ask is, what's the interest rate going to be? What are my payments? They're important, but they're nowhere near as important around getting your structure right. And particularly now, when we see interest rates so low, and we're going to talk about it tonight, we see that a lot of our investment properties now have a positive cash surplus. Yep. And you know what you can do with that surplus? You can take it and dump it off your home loan. So it accelerates the repayment of that home loan.
And we've got a great example of that sort of coming up soon. And you just touched on a question, and this is leading into our next sort of slide here. This is the question, Brian, everyone wanted to know. Get out your crystal ball. I want to have some mystical kind of predictions here, if you can. What is happening with interest rates? What should investors know? This is what everyone's been asking about. Give it to us straight.
I thought you were going to ask me when my horse was going to win next.
We're talking about good investments, Brian, good investments.
So interest rates, look, they are at an all-time low. We're seeing interest rates now at low twos, 2.35, 2.39. Hard for a lot of people to get their head around, to be honest. And that's on the back of the official cash rate. So that's the cash rate that the trading banks in New Zealand buy their money off the Reserve Bank. The wholesale bottom rate is 0.25. There's a margin that the Reserve Bank put on and then a margin that the banks add on. It's tipped at that official cash rate. Early 21 is going to go below zero. Now, that's not going to mean, unfortunately, that we're going to have banks paying us to borrow money, because when the margin goes on, we're still going to see interest rates that look like 195, 175.
Wow.
And hard to sort of believe that that's the case, but and overlaying that, given the challenges that we've all experienced this year and the challenges that's put on the broader economy, the Reserve Bank's very keen to see rates stay low, so they're actually introducing a funding for lending program, which essentially means they're going to provide the money to the trading banks in New Zealand at a thinner margin.
Yep.
So you go reduced OCR early next year, funding for lending program. Everybody that I talk to, as in the economists of the banks, are predicting interest rates with a 1.
So it's going to keep things low.
It's going to keep things low, yeah. It's great.
Now, how long should people be fixing interest rates for? Because that was another key question that's been coming up.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And it's a common question that we're faced with all the time. And there is no right answer to that question, Zach. It really does depend on people's personal circumstances, their personal risk profile. If they're a little bit risk adverse, you'd hard to argue that there's anything wrong with saying, lock me in at 5 years at 2.99. I know where my cost of funds are, I know my rent covers it, and I don't have to deal with that for the next 3-4 years. So there's nothing wrong with that. However, if we believe that in a year's time, 6 months to 12 months time, we're looking at rates at a high 1 and I'm locked in at a high 2, they pay for that.
Makes a difference.
Yeah, it does. So by and large, majority of our clients today are just rolling on a year-by-year basis and have been for the last few years, and it's proven to be the right strategy.
Yeah, again, if anyone is curious about what they should be doing for their next move, give the guys at Loan Market a call. It's free, it's easy, you get some great advice. Yeah, I've got some questions for you too, because you've been in this game for a while now, Brian, and we had the events of this year, the pandemic. Did you ever see interest rates going this low?
Honestly, no. But I've been amazed by that for a number of years now, Zach, to be honest. I've got to tell you that I funded an investment property 18 months ago and was quite happy to lock it in at 3.69, thinking I was clever.
Yeah. Got a great deal.
Hard to pick. So, no, I didn't see it coming. But, it's great, and it's certainly making property investment so viable.
And I think another thing I want to ask you too, because it's important for, tonight we're talking about investors trying to get more properties or those getting into the market who don't have them yet. The stress test that banks put on, when you are applying for finance, it is something to be mindful of, because it will basically dictate what you can borrow. And tell us about that a little bit, the stress test for the banks.
Yeah, certainly. So while they might be charging you 2.39 as an interest rate, they're testing your ability to meet the payments if interest rates went up substantially. And that's responsible, and that's what the banks in New Zealand have to be. They have to make sure that if people are gearing up today, well, what happens when interest rates do return to 3, to 4, to 5? So test rates now at the banks generally are around anywhere from a mid-5 to a mid-6% test rate. And that just makes sure that when things do increase and improve in terms of interest rate-wise, that people can afford it.
And different banks will have different stress rates, won't they?
100%, Zach, yeah. And that's why you will see a certain bank at one given point in time, if their appetite is lower, often what they'll do is they'll just increase their test rate, and it'll mean less people will qualify with that bank. And that's why if you're with a certain bank and you thought you would be able to borrow what you wanted to, and that bank says no, that certainly does not mean that you can't borrow that money. You need to talk to us, because we see anywhere up to $100,000 difference in borrowing power from scenario to scenario, from bank to bank at any point in time.
And that could, in many regions, that could easily be the difference between getting the property or not.
Particularly at an auction, Zach, right?
Exactly. Having that a little bit extra helps. Yeah. Now we're going to look at sort of interest cover versus the rent received, because obviously that's really important here for landlords. Now, if we look at the current trends in our rental markets, and again across Ray White New Zealand, and what is likely going to remain for the short to medium term, many landlords could be surprised at the achievable rental figures they're achieving and the demand that's there as well. Demand is up. Tenants want our properties. We don't have enough to give them. This is going to place upward pressure on rentals. It's just a fact. Unfortunately, at the moment, till we get more houses, we can't change that. But talk us through this, Brian, interest cover versus rent received, and how that will impact our landlords.
Yeah, well, back in the day, a lot of people would invest in property because there was this term called negative gearing, which meant that our rent, less our interest costs and running costs on the property, had a net loss. And I was paying a lot of tax to the government, so that would offset my tax. Trying to achieve that today, very difficult. With interest rates so low, strong rental returns. So if I use just a really straightforward example and said that we bought an investment property at $600,000 and we rented it at $600 a week and 100% funded it. Well, our rent will be circa $30,000 and our interest cost will be less than $15,000. So it's not going to cost you the difference to run that property, and there's going to be a surplus at the end.
And you're sort of talking about steering that towards your actual home loan too, and paying that off as well.
Yes, well, and that's, we see a lot of people that make the mistake of waiting until they're freehold to move into property investment. And all they've done is miss the growth that they could have had over time.
Capital gain.
Yeah, and they've got good equity, but there's still home loan debt. And the way that that interest rates are and the net surplus, you can channel that net surplus and help accelerate the reduction of your home loan.
Yeah. And we've got a great example to go through soon on that one. But I did have a question for you. And look, I know we're biased here. We'd love to manage all your properties if you're watching us tonight. But what are your honest thoughts on the cost of property management fees? Because we do hear sometimes that landlords think that they might be saving money by not paying for those fees. It's a deductible expense if you do have them. Are landlords really saving by trying to do it themselves and not incurring that property management fee cost?
Yeah, look, well, I know we talk later about the most common mistake when we see people investing in property and their debt structure, but one of the most common mistakes is that people think, I'll save a bit of money by managing this myself. Look, in today's environment, you know better than anyone, there's so many regulations that you've got to comply with, and if you don't get that right, it's going to cost you money. But what we see time and time again with investors that come in and talk to us are properties that are under rented, so that they've formed a great relationship with their tenant, and they feel difficult about having a conversation that the market's moved up and therefore so should the rent because they're a lovely person and I don't want to do that. Well, that's nice, but it costs them.
And you've got to treat it like a business too, because again, it is a cost that landlords incur, but it is deductible. And therefore, for paying that cost, obviously, you'll see that market rent stay at market levels. We treat it like a business. The emotion's kind of removed. Do you have your properties managed?
100%. 100%.
Well, it's a pretty good testament. I hope they're with us, mate.
100%. Yes, down in Dunedin.
Yeah, perfect. So now we're going to look at the investment property finance side. And like most services, Brian, it is important to shop around because not everyone is created equal. And this is particularly true when it comes to finance, isn't it?
Look, 100%. I mean, well, I know we've touched on it, but I want to reiterate this, making sure that we get the structure right. So we've still got our owner-occupied home with some debt against it. Then that's our focus. So we focus on repaying that. It's our bad debt, and our good debt stays at interest only. That's really important. Our ownership structures are really important. So particularly when we're owning investment property that makes a profit. So typically in any household, one member of that household earns more money than the other. So you need to get good, strong accounting, taxation advice. But that advice could be that you set up a look-through company and the share ownership structure of that company could be weighted more towards the person that earns less income, so they pay less tax on the profit. So ownership structure is really, really important. And of course, the other thing that we've seen a lot of media about over the last sort of 48 hours is there's a lot of pressure on the Reserve Bank of New Zealand around properties going up in New Zealand. It's becoming unaffordable. What are you doing to control that? And in fairness to the Reserve Bank, I think they've done a magnificent job over the last sort of 6 to 7 years, and they have helped New Zealand navigate through challenging times. And there's this set of what they call macro-prudential rules, and it sounds scary, but really it's just a couple of levers that they're able to pull at any given point in time to help moderate the market or certain sectors of the market. So just recently, they've announced that that going forward from March next year, you will require a 30% deposit or enough equity in other property to leverage that, so you've got a 30% deposit to fund an investment property. And we've seen that move from 40% when they first brought it in, it eased to 30%, and then they said 30% outside of Auckland, 40% inside of Auckland. Then they eased it and it went down to 20% where it is today. But I can tell you, look, the Reserve Bank's the governing body of all the banks in New Zealand, and banks in New Zealand like to be aggressive and get market share, so they spend their fair share of time in the naughty corner with the Reserve Bank. So they've actually taken this opportunity right now to actually adopt and introduce the higher required deposit and LVR on investment properties effective immediately.
Because all the major banks have made that move.
They've all made that move, all of them. So you're required to have 30% equity or deposit today, even though the Reserve Bank's not introducing that requirement mandate until March next year. So that's fine. Unbeknown to a lot of our viewers tonight, there's a secondary tier of lenders in New Zealand. Their full-time business is providing mortgages to Kiwis and Australians, and for want of a better term, they're called non-banks. I hate the term, but it means they're not banks, but they write mortgages. And they're not governed by the rules and regulations of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So we have a panel of very professional, very ethical lenders that are governed by the Responsible Lending Code, and they are still funding today with a 20% deposit on investment, and we're doing that today, tomorrow, rest of the week.
Whoa, 20% deposit. So we can circumnavigate this 30% rule with a non-bank lender and get an investment property with the 20% deposit.
That's available today. Whether it will still be available in March next year, even the non-banks, because a lot of them get their funding from trading banks in New Zealand. So by definition, they are impacted. However, some non-banks in New Zealand obtain their funding offshore, so they're not governed by those rules. And you might say, gee, is this safe, is this secure?
Because I've always been a bit hesitant at the idea of, I don't know whether it's just because of the name non-bank lender, but I kind of have this vision of some guy in his garage charging 30% interest rates, but that's not the case. I mean, what's the difference in the rates? And obviously you're saying they're steadfast kind of companies.
We'd be looking at a maximum a 1% differential between what you would obtain that funding from a bank today. versus a non-bank.
Wow.
And if you look at that 1% cost differential versus having to accumulate or save the extra 10% deposit,
Yeah.
I think it works.
Well, and even if you look at the capital gains that have been happening at the moment and put that on 18 months, you're probably coming out in the wash all right anyway.
Well, that's right. Wait until you've saved that extra 10%, and how much more do you have to pay for the property while that's occurred?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'd say, again, pick up the phone, give Loan Market a call, because there are these other options that are available that can help you into your next investment property. We've got the tenants ready and waiting for them. We'll show you some stats on that later, but give them a call, because it's something I've probably been a little bit wary of myself, but it's definitely a really solid option for a lot of investors.
Yes, it is.
Now, the next topic we're going to get to is pretty interesting, I think, and one that many investors may not be aware of. I was actually speaking to one of our Landlord Academy series watchers yesterday about this, and she's just gone through this process. So I hope you're watching, Nikita, because this one is for you. This is all about turning your own home into an investment property. So Brian, talk us through this.
Very common. We see it a lot. And hopefully we see those people before they do it, because they don't get the right advice. They end up with all their debt structure upside down. So if you just think for a moment that you own your current house, you've been focusing on repaying it and you've got a lot of equity, now you decide, I want to upgrade, but my existing property will be a great rental.
Yep.
And that's, a lot of people think that that's a good strategy, and it is. They know the property, they know its quality, but they've outgrown it. So there's a lot of equity in that property. So as soon as it turns into an investment property, we've got low debt. So we've got low tax deductible debt and interest on it. So our good debt is not high, and we have to 100% fund the new purchase. So now we've got all our debt against the owner-occupied home. It's all bad debt and very little good debt.
I like the idea of the good versus bad debt, because it's quite an interesting concept of how you should look at things financially.
So there's a really straightforward way to address that. And, for our viewers, they might think, oh, that sounds a bit technical and a bit scary. It's not. They talk to an accountant first, get taxation advice. That's critical to make sure this is going to work for you. But we see it constantly, and there'd be very few people that do this, that when they come in and they see us, they don't follow through, and they set up a little company that's Mum and Dad Limited.
Yep.
They are the owners, the directors and shareholders of that company, and they sell their house to that company, and we raise 100% of the purchase price of that property, secured against it and the one that they're buying, and the debt's now all in the company name, and it's totally geared. And we take that cash that we bought the property with and we put it into our new purchase. So we've turned all of our debt that was low into tax deductible, and we've reduced our home loan.
We've got a little visual sort of example there, I think, which should be good for the listeners to sort of see this. So talk us through this process you're describing now.
Sure. So we'll look at these, and then we'll look at the outputs. It really is a game changer, Zach. So if we look at that example, we've bought our current house is worth $800,000. We've done really well. We've got the debt down to $200,000, and then we buy a new property for $1.2 million. We've got no cash because it's all sitting in our house. Yep. We have to borrow the $1.2 million. So we've got $200,000 worth of good debt and $1.2 million versus bad debt.
And you're saying that's the bad debt because there's no deductibility off the interest on your own home.
Correct. Yep. Correct. So as soon as we sell that property to our little family company that we've set up, that we own, look at the change. Now our investment property is 100% geared to $800,000, and we can borrow that because we're leveraging the equity off the new place.
Yes.
So we've got our tax deductible debts now $800,000, and our homeland's now half. Now that's powerful. And when you look at the next slide, the profit and loss statement of the two comparatively, they're game changers.
Really brings it home, doesn't it?
It does. So if we don't do that change, we can see that our interest cost on our investment property is very low. It means our net profit at $24,000. And look, we shouldn't be concerned about making money. We're paying tax. That's a good thing. But if we can pay less tax, and by changing that ownership structure, we can see the impact there. That's gonna net $5,000 or $6,000 different per annum to the client.
And that's money you can put into other things as well.
Like reducing your home loan.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why, again, please, we're not trying to do the hard sell. We're trying to help everyone watching tonight pick up the phone and give the guys at Loan Market a call, because I remember having a chat with, is it Logan Reardon, I think in Hobsonville. Mate, I was expecting this 10-minute call, and about an hour later he'd given me all sorts of ideas and things I hadn't thought of, helped me through it. They are there to help. I wanted to highlight though on this slide though, Brian, because we've got the property management fees up there looking relatively high. It must be very nice rental there. Look, typically property management fees across New Zealand run around about 8 to 9% depending on where you are. And yes, they are 100% claimable expense, but not only this, if you've been watching our Landlord Academy series across the last 3 weeks, you know full well that there are some really serious financial implications for landlords if you don't get your healthy home standards in place. Even next year after February 11th with the RTA Amendment Act changes, if you incorrectly send a termination notice to a tenant, that can be a $6,500 fine. So these are some really kind of innocuous, easy mistakes that landlords might make. I want to ask you again, what is your advice to landlords who think they're saving money by trying to do it themselves? Because I know they can, but there's risks involved.
Yeah, look, and it's one of the most common mistakes we see. To your point, the cost is tax deductible.
Yep.
And if you get it wrong, the consequences are huge now. But what we see often is people that have come in, they own one rental property, they're looking to fund into another, and we ask them, what's the rent on that property? And it's way off market.
Yeah.
It's like, how did that happen? Oh, they've been in there for 3-4 years, they're lovely people, I don't really want to put the rent up. So you end up in this relationship, which is great, they're looking after them, that's fine, but you're out of market.
Yep.
So ultimately, it ends up costing you money.
Exactly. Talk to us, talk to Loan Market, there's plenty of free advice, we are here to help. But there's another misconception that kind of floats around a bit, and that's around getting into investment property and your current financial position. Because for many watching tonight, it might be actually easier than they thought to get the investment property and actually reduce their own home loan as well. Talk us through what's up here, Brian.
Yeah, so we see people come to us, and I had a couple just earlier this week that had come in and and they sat down and they said, you know what, we've procrastinated, and we thought we'll always get into property investment when we've paid our home off.
Yep.
And they're sitting now on a property with $800,000, they owe $80,000, and they could have moved into property investment years ago. And great they are now, and that's going to help their financial security in the future. But in the meantime, they've been focusing on reducing the debt. If they'd moved in earlier, as long as you've got overall 20% equity, so think about, I own my house at 800, I only owe 400, well, we can leverage you up to 80% of the value of that house, and that needs to be the deposit on the new one. And as we've seen, that there's no financial outlay for you. It's you're leveraging the equity in your home to help improve your financial position.
When you're saying too, the surplus obviously can help you pay off your other home loan faster as well. It's a kind of win-win for investors.
It is.
Like we say, we've got tenants who are hungry for these properties. Like the demand is there to fill them.
And that can be $5,000-6,000 a year. If you sit with our guys, they'll show you graphically what that does in terms of how much that shortens the term of your loan. Becomes quite inspiring, actually.
One thing I really like too about the working with the loan market brokers, just from personal experience as well, is they can kind of give you this little table where basically they come back to you and show you the different rates, the cash back you can get from different banks. Again, you go through to your bank that you have the relationship with for years. And look, we're not here again to bag banks. They're your partners and they help us all. But you work through loan market and it's quite amazing the difference in, sometimes it can be $100,000, $200,000 extra.
It's just the advice piece, really, and it's just making sure that people are in the right space at the right time and they're getting the right structures.
Now, one thing I just wanted, because we look at this 20% equity position as fine, and I just want to clarify again for those watching and for myself a little bit here as well, Brian, with these non-bank lenders, the difference between the current rates we've got with your ASB, your Westpac, your BNZ, and the non-bank lenders, you're saying that's only around about 1%?
It is only exactly 1% today, so we're looking 3.39 versus 2.39.
Wow!
But you've got we can go to 80% on your home. So in that example, we talked with that couple that they've got a lot of equity in the house. We can leverage that up to 80% and put that into the investment property. And whatever the shortfall is, we then borrow against the investment property. So it might be in that situation that we've borrowed a big chunk from a bank and a small chunk from a non-bank, but we've got you in as to where you need to be.
Yeah, and again, just talk to the guys because you can mix it up. You can go through all different sorts of lenders. You can do one little bit here, one little bit here. Give the guys at Loan Market a call. They are there to help because we want to try and build more investment stock for the wonderful tenants we have waiting and to help grow wealth for our landlords and those that are getting into it as well. Now, on this topic, we're talking still about why property investment, why stay in the market. A couple of key points here and some interesting stuff I found as well. So, I mean, again, where else are you going to get a better return in 2021? The housing market, generally speaking, is less vulnerable to global shocks. We've seen that this year, despite what the predictions were as we were heading into lockdown and what was going to happen with the housing market. That's just been blown right out of the water. The costs are tax deductible, including the interest on the mortgage. Look, there's no capital gains tax after 5 years of ownership. Interesting to hear with these lovely letters that the Reserve Bank and the government have been writing each other the last couple of days. The LVR, but the changes to the Bright Line test might be sort of extended past the 5 years, but for now it's 5 years. Also, too, significant historic long-term asset growth. As you know, the banks are willing to lend, Ryan. You see it every day. One thing I want to stress for all landlords watching tonight is that we hear this rhetoric around healthy homes compliance or the RTA Act. It's becoming too difficult to be a landlord now. I'm going to get out of the market. The healthy homes is a perfect example. We showed that in our second session, where the average cost, about 50% of our Ray White properties cost less than $5,000 to bring up to the healthy home standards. If you're getting out of the market, it's such a silly decision. Look, I just think it's a no-brainer. I found a Forsyth Bar released a really interesting focus on property report last week, and I just wanted to cover off a few points. I sort of was having a look at this building this session. Look, despite the current pandemic, October 2020 saw record high house prices in every single region across New Zealand. We've had 13.5% year-on-year house price growth across the country. Many regions and specific areas across New Zealand are actually higher than that. They reinforce the idea, which I've been saying tonight, that people have a greater desire to nest. People are staying at home for longer. Our tenants are wanting to, make that rental property a home. Again, that's reducing the stock that's available. Look, this is one I found particularly interesting. There's a lot of Kiwis returning home and also new migrants wanting to make New Zealand their home as well. So Immigration New Zealand stated in July that there are 100,000 visa applications sitting in the queue, ready for when the borders reopen. Where are these 100,000 people going to live? They're not all going to be able to buy their first home straight away. Maybe with loan market they might be able to, but we need these rental properties. Now, certainly we can't say that, we don't have this real crystal ball. We can't say that house prices are going to continue increasing as they have been. But Brian, in your opinion, is there any better place to invest your money right now? And please don't say racehorses.
Well, I think the opening point that you made is where are you going to get a better return today? So not only do you enjoy, as we see, positively geared property, so the return on your investment, your money invested, is stronger than it is going to be sitting in a bank account, and we get the growth on the property. However quick or slow and determined that is, you're getting a double hit there. So for me personally, I can't see a better option.
So please talk to us. We've got the demand here, and as I'm saying, landlords watching tonight who are considering building that portfolio, or perhaps you haven't invested in property before and you want to get into it, I'm going to prove it to you. We have the tenant demand to fill them. So Ray White New Zealand, all the property management network, I sent them all a survey as part of the Landlord Academy series, and I asked them a couple of key questions. First one here is the tenant demand increasing? A huge 3/4 of them said emphatically yes. We have more tenants than ever looking for our rental properties. Are our tenants requesting to stay longer? Are those lease lengths extending out, the tenure of lease? Nearly 2/3 of them said yes. And I find these stats really interesting, Brian. So the last 3 months, we're kind of averaging around about that 28,000 requests to view our properties every single month. 28,000 people are saying, I want to view 12 Smith Street, I want to view 14 Smith Street every single month. If you filter that down through the actual tenancy application, so someone's viewed the property and they've committed to saying, I want to stay here for 12, 18 months, the numbers are huge. We're kind of averaging about 7,000 a month. And that's just Ray White New Zealand. Now, these viewing numbers are up sort of 15-20% on the same time last year. Also, too, I had a look online last night. I think Gisborne, as an example, has three-bedroom properties available. The whole of Gisborne. If you look at the west coast of the South Island, shout out to 100% Property Management down there. If you look at the west coast, there's 7. Wow. For the whole of the west coast. So the demand is there. But what it's really important, though, is for landlords, you need to be getting the right types of properties as well. So as part of the survey, I asked the property managers, what are the most in-demand properties in your area? And I told them to please select as many that applied. So basically any property that they could fill really quickly. No surprises there, Brian. 92% of them said, look, if we had quality 3-bedroom homes, we would fill those pretty much straight away. 4 bedrooms are slightly down the list as well. 2 bedrooms obviously there. Speak to your local property manager. They can tell you your area specific demand, but this is generally speaking across the board. Are you looking at potentially getting another one yourself, Brian?
Just did actually in Christchurch.
Nice. Out of curiosity, how many bedrooms? What was it?
It was actually 2 bedroom, brand new.
Yep.
Within sort of the 5k inner ring of the city. And yeah, for me, I just look at Christchurch. I think, man, that of all the areas in New Zealand, it hasn't gone. It keeps getting a bloody nose for various reasons, but we'll see if I'm right.
Yep. No, definitely. Honestly, get the right property. Speak to your property manager. They'll tell you what the area-specific demand is, because that can fluctuate as new developments come onto the market and things like that. But landlords, the final point here in terms of picking the right investment, it's really crucial, obviously, whether it's a 3-bedroom or the area, but making sure you get the right property. So if you're looking to grow the portfolio, it's crucial you pick the right one at the start. Couple of key points here. We've talked about this across the Landlord Academy series, but is it compliant and is it rent ready? So about 90% of our new managements we get, Brian, as part of this survey, we were told by property managers they're not ready to go.
Right.
So there'll be a missing insulation component, or some of the healthy home stuff isn't quite up to scratch. I think for anyone watching, we've got 4 or 5 days until the Healthy Homes next deadline comes in, so I hope you're ready. Check things like insulation, the Healthy Home standards, smoke alarms. Consider this when you're purchasing a new property, because all it leads to is unnecessarily delays and a reduction of that return. We can't put a tenant into a property until we've got those boxes ticked, because otherwise then the fines come into place, so just consider that. The other one, as we highlighted before, is it needed? Every market will have their own different demands. I referenced Gisborne, who I think have 2 3-bedroom properties available on Trade Me at the moment. They are screaming out for 3-bedroom properties. Talk to your property manager or have a look online, whether that's Trade Me or realestate.co.nz. Search the most sort of popular properties in the regions there. You can see the view counts. You can see which stock is low. Make sure what you're getting is actually needed. This is a key one, because we see, unfortunately, a lot of investors think they're making a great decision and find out that unfortunately it isn't. Is the property legal? So can the dwelling that you're actually purchasing legally be rented out? Did it start out as what it is now? So that's the old converted garage, the sleep out, the 2-story villa that someone's converted into 2 different dwellings. Please check this first, or if you're interested in purchasing something like that, give us a call, send us the listing, and we can do a little bit of research for you. Another sort of great trick there is just check the council file. If you're going through a property and there's 6 bedrooms there and the file shows you there's 3, it's a bit of a red flag. So make sure you pick the right investment. But Brian, you're seeing these 3 points here up on the screen of getting the right investment. What are your thoughts on new builds as investment? Because they'll obviously tick these boxes. But
well, they certainly do. They certainly do. Actually, just on that, I purchased about 18 months ago in Dunedin, and Amanda Ivermay down in Ray White in Dunedin.
Yep.
She went through and there was a small list of 2 or 3 things we had to do, but she got that all sorted,
Yep.
done, dusted, and we've been 100% full, since from day one. So yeah, that's been great to have someone on your side to just take care of that, right?
Yeah.
But new, and it wasn't the sole reason I bought new in Christchurch, but the Reserve Bank LVR restrictions that have just been implemented don't apply to any property that is brand new or has had the title issued in the last 6 months. So brand new properties, you can still fund those with your the bank that you love,
Yep.
up to 80%, no problem. So a big tick there.
And these are the ones too that typically will rent quicker. We might be able to attract a premium rent simply because of the demand that's there. Really do consider it. But if you are looking for a property, like I said, we've got the demand to fill them, but just make sure you do the checks. And as Brian referenced, shout out there to Amanda down in Dunedin, if you are looking at an investment property, you're going to go to the viewing, give us a call. Some of our property managers might even come along. They can at least have a look at the listing for you. The sales team can check the file. We can give you some advice before you make a very costly mistake. Now, Brian, I didn't want to go through tonight's session without acknowledging our tenants, because we've got a lot of tenants. We've got 19,000 plus properties. You can imagine some of them are trying to get into their first home too. I wanted to reassure people and our tenants watching tonight that it is still possible. What are your top tips for all those tenants going, I want to either get my own home or get into an investment property?
Sure. And we see this often, and look, it starts with your KiwiSaver. Like KiwiSaver is the number one vehicle to get yourself into your first home. And we see it all the time. Young people and couples coming to see us that if they hadn't invested in their KiwiSaver, they wouldn't have the deposit. The common mistake people make is they start their job and the default is 3% of your income into KiwiSaver. matched by your employer, so we now have a total of 6% equivalent of your income going in, well, you're actually able to and should put the maximum, which is 10%. So your 10% plus your 3% from your employer, 13% of your income. You go that 4 or 5 years time, particularly as a couple, there's your deposit.
Well, it's kind of one of those things too. We sort of talked about this yesterday, where you usually consume it if you don't. You don't really. I mean, you do miss it. It's 10% is quite different to 3%, but still, if you really work hard, it is achievable.
Oh, 100%. And to your point, it'll just be consumed if you don't if you don't sort of bump that up to the maximum. The other thing that we need to make sure first home buyers are doing is when they're buying their first property, often they're looking to borrow a large proportion of the value of the property, so they're trying to borrow 85-90% of the value of the property, which is absolutely fine, but the banks are really keen to see that they've been diligent on not accumulating other debt.
Yes.
So if you've got debt now and you're trying to get yourself into your first home, focus on repaying that other debt. We'd like to see you in a position where you've got little to no other debt. The other thing is that you might be sitting here going, well, and this is the reality, right? The cost of the mortgage can be cheaper than the rent. So I know I can afford it. But essentially, what are you paying in rent plus what are you saving versus what will the new mortgage payment be? Banks will look at that. They actually go, that actually shows that it's affordable to you without you having to change your lifestyle.
Well, particularly if you've got the 12, 18-month history of no tenant arrears, you've been paying the rent consistently without zero issues, that will help you into your home.
100% it does. And, we've used that many times where we actually say we get confirmation that the rent's been paid on time every time for the last 12 months.
Great.
Well, that's like credit rating.
Yeah.
The other point that I'd really like to make around this is the bank of mum and dad.
Good old mum and dad. Eh?
So we talk about there's all this rhetoric in the media around the property market's moving away from first home buyers. I look at my own position. I look at my children. Young Jake's now 18. He's going to be starting looking at property. It hasn't moved out. I just need to help support him in.
Yeah.
So the way that works, and the banks are very user friendly around it, is that, as an example, if Jake wants to buy a $500,000 property in Dunedin, which he still can do, and he's managed to get his 10% deposit, I can provide a guarantee for the other 10%. So then the bank looks at him as an 80% borrowing client. They'll allow him to use his boarders, as his mates, his flatmates, and helps pay it all off. And the key about that is I'm only in the gun for that 10%, that little bit. And I'll tell you what, to sign a few pieces of paper and get them out of the house, it's cheap.
And again, I'd stress this point, whether you are a tenant watching us tonight, whether you're a landlord with a dozen properties or more, or whether you're just looking to get your first investment property, please pick up the phone, give Loan Market a call. They can help you achieve your goals and your ambitions. And all it can take is a quick, easy, free phone call.
100%.
Now, we've got plenty of free resources, Brian. I'm going to keep going through every week as part of the Landlord Academy series. We've been releasing free resources. You've brought a couple along with us tonight. These are available from your Loan Market brokers or your Ray White Property Management office. Tell us what these are, Brian.
Look, essentially it's just the how-to.
Yep.
So again, it's just all free information. It's about education. When you generally as a first home buyer or entering into property investment, it's not something you do often. So study up, and those tools they're full of good information.
And I quite like the one on the right there, the Grow Your Portfolio, the side hustle kind of book. If you do own your own property, if you're lucky enough to do that already, this is a great tool to help you get into that next one. So please do request them from our offices tomorrow. We've got them there available for you. Where can people go to get help, Brian? We've talked a lot about Loan Market and your services. How can they find out more?
Well, the website's up there, so loanmarket.co.nz, and those resources are available as a free download. You can request those and they'll just come straight into your inbox. The best thing to do is just talk to us. You've said it a number of times tonight, Zach, and thank you. But often just a chat, a quick conversation. COVID for us was actually, strangely, fantastic for our business. And we spent a lot of time talking to our existing clients about talking them off the ledge of a mortgage repayment holiday. But what it did was it actually forced us to become digital enabled.
Yep.
So we have a magnificent online fact find. We do a lot of video appointments. We've got some great software that allows people to upload their bank statements, and we're now facilitating people into properties where it's all done online.
Well, again, another little shout out there to Logan Reardon, I think was the last name. That was all through phone calls and online. Everything was sent through. You filled out your forms, you did a little survey. Very, very easy.
Beats the Auckland traffic, right?
Oh yes, save you plenty of time there. So again, you can do that all online. There's plenty of information there. Please do talk to Loan Market. Again, no matter what position you are, and they can help. Now, we're not doing the live questions tonight, but we did have quite a few common questions that came through. So I'm going to throw these your way, Brian, before we sort of close off tonight. What's the most common investment financing mistake you see being made?
That people have just walked in to a bank, obtained the funding on their investment property, and got no advice around the structure. So they're now reducing their good debt when they've still got bad debt. So that by far and away, that's the most common mistake we see.
Cool. Should we fix the interest rate for long term?
Well, again, that does depend on your own personal risk profile. And we've got some clients that say, look, lock me in at 299 for 5 years, it's great. My personal view is that at the moment, 1 year is the right time to fix for. At some point, there's going to be rates are going to start to turn, and you know, I don't think you might be fortunate to pick the bottom. I wouldn't worry about that. I just take advantage of the great rates that are available now, and when they start to move, then we'd look to give advice around locking in.
Look, this is an interesting one because there can be some fees involved, obviously, with this question. But I'm on a 3-year fixed rate of 4%. Should I break?
Yeah, again, it's different from person to person. Invariably, the cost of breaking that, so when you committed to that 4% for 3-year fixed, invariably that money's funded offshore. So the bank's gone and bought it for you, bought it in at a fixed price. You want to give it back now, they can't give it back to where it came from, so they've got to now lend it out at what the new remaining, the interest rate is on the remaining period of that fixed term. It might be 1 year. They're now lending it back out at 2.39. They're going to suffer a loss.
Yep.
They're going to pass that loss on to you. That loss is going to be offset by the new reduced interest rate. Often they sort of weigh each other out, but just come to us, ask the question, we'll get the hard numbers, we'll work it out, and we'll give you the advice. Often it can be worthwhile if you think, gee, I'm starting to get nervous that I'm on 4, rates are dropping and they're going to turn. Look, I want to lock in now, long term, well, then it could be worthwhile. But again, just talk to us, we'll run the numbers for you.
Another little plug there for Logan and Loan Market, but also too, if you are in that position where you are trying to break, they can tell you what that fee will be. And in some situations, they'll tell you what the cashback might be from another bank to help offset that as well. That's what Logan was helping me with there. So, look, I don't want to have to repay an investment debt after 5 years. What can I do? I think that refers to the interest-only comments we were talking about earlier.
Yes, yeah. So, and this is going to be, a lot of our viewers are going to be facing this, right? They're coming off their 5-year interest-only period, and their bank is saying you've got to go principal and interest now. Well, that's not the case. You don't have to take that as verbatim. You talk to us, we'll renegotiate back with your bank. If they're not willing to consider that, we'll look at other options. And to date, we haven't been able to, there's very few people we haven't been able to extend that period. It's about being responsible and making sure that other side of their debt structure is reducing.
And so there's a lot of help you're able to give clients watching tonight. So a couple of key questions here. Yeah, I'm going to start with this one first, even though it's below it. Does it cost to use your services? And if the banks have said no, what can they do now?
Well, I'll answer the second question first. Just ring us.
Yeah.
Just give us a call. We deal with everybody, all the trading banks in New Zealand that deal in the mortgage broker space. We deal with. So, just because one bank says no, it doesn't mean that the answer is no. We see it often, where 1, 2, 3 banks might not like your profile, but another bank goes, you know what, that client, and we see it differently. We're happy to do that deal.
Or their stress test might be a little bit lower.
100%. Yep, most definitely. And yes, look, the best things in life are free, and our service is free. We're paid by the banks.
Fantastic. And you are genuinely helpful. There's none of this, haranguing or harassment. It's like you help themselves out, and if you want to continue working with you, it's your call.
100%. And, more than often, we'll encourage people to stay with their existing bank.
Yeah.
Banks, we're all working in this together to provide the right outcome. But it's, to your point, at certain times, different banks have different appetites, and that might not fit where that client wants to be at that point in time. So, there are times where we need to move the client about.
Great. So some great advice there from Loan Market. Give the guys a call. They are there to help. So we are now drawing to a close of our first ever Landlord Academy series, Brian. It would be good to get this one done and dusted. I hope you've all been enjoying it, but a bit of a recap for the last 4 weeks. So the first week obviously was the general landlord compliance. Part 2 was the healthy home standards that we went through. Part 3 was the big one. It's the RTA Amendments Act, which the majority of that's coming into force next year on the 11th of February. Part 4, obviously today with Brian, the future of property investment and property finance. I'm highlighting all this because if you've missed anything, you want to go back, you can re-watch these at your leisure. So all of the same links you've used to view us throughout the month, you can go back to those, you can pause them. They've got captions there if you're hearing impaired as well, so you can keep up to date. All of our clients who've registered for the Landlord Academy series will receive a full follow-up email next week with all of our resources, all of the free help. And a key thing I just want to raise for all landlords, because we seem to have a vastly majority private landlord audience watching this series, you can do this yourself. You can get across the compliance hurdle, you can get those property compliance, but only if you're educated. The risks are severe. Obviously there is a huge benefit in paying the property management fees, and we can help you remove a lot of that risk. You can do this though, but only if you're educated. And if you're worried about that, if you're worried about any of those risks, please do give us a call. We've got heaps of resources there available for you. Those are just the ones that we've released as part of the Landlord Academy series. We've got the Healthy Homes Compliance Checklist where you can see how your property stacks up, the RTA Amendments Act Quick Guide. There's so much stuff there available. And I wanted to highlight too, for any private landlord watching, we do have private landlord services. So Brian, are you aware, if you are a DIY landlord and you're trying to do it yourself, we can still help.
100%, and we get a lot of guys in like that, you know, that I don't need a property manager to do that. No, but you need a property manager to make sure you're compliant. You're going to make sure your property's got good tenants in. Sure, when there's maintenance to be done, knock yourself out.
Well, you kind of stolen my thunder there.
Oh, sorry, mate.
No, I did ask you the question. We can help you find tenants. We can help set up the tenancy agreements. It was a great little segue. It was perfect. I didn't even prompt him on that one. Inspection only services. Look, we can do a lot of things for landlords. Just please do talk to your office. I hope you've seen across the last 4 weeks with the effort and the time we've put into the Landlord Academy series that we do genuinely want to help everyone. Whether you are a landlord with a management with us or not, we do have services there available. Pick up the phone and give you a call. Finally, I want to say a big thank you to a few people here, the Ray White New Zealand team. There are a lot of moving parts as part of this series that have helped put it all together, so thank you to everyone for your help in getting this across the line. You can't see them, but I can see them behind me in the lights, the core creative team. They've been absolutely fantastic in helping present a quality production to all of you. Thank you to all of our guest speakers. Thank you, Brian, for joining us tonight.
Well, just a shout out to you, Zach. Like, congratulations. I think it's a great thing you've done. You know, educating Kiwis free of cost. I just take my hat off to you. Well done, mate.
Cheers, Brian. And I have to say thanks to Mum too. She's been watching every week, so thanks for the support there, Mum. But if you want to find the Ray White property manager in your region, visit raywhite.co.nz. They are there to help. If you have questions, send them through to academy@raywhite.com. We're getting plenty of great questions from landlords. If you're wanting to seek some really independent advice, if you're very steadfast and wanting to do it your own, tenancy.govt.nz, hud.govt.nz, and landlords.co.nz is another great resource there as well. So just to close it all off, just a huge thank you to everyone. Thank you so much for participating in our Landlord Academy series. I hope you found it beneficial, and we will see you again soon.